Hey, and welcome back to the final part of this procedural donut in geometry nodes. And today we're gonna jump into the shader nodes and make some materials for this donut. So let's dive into Blender and check it out. So this is where we left off last time. We have in the first part, we made the dough and UV unwrapped it, made some displacement for it, made it kind of lumpy, and then we put this middle line here. And then in second part we did the icing with the drips and the thickness using different techniques. And then in the previous part, the third part, we made two types of sprinkles, one of them being these small cylinders and the other one being these round balls. And now it's time to tackle the shading of all of this, and we can do this from one of two ways. And I'm going to show you how to do it both ways, but we're going to do it the more commonly used way. But first I'm going to show you how it would work with the first way. So this first way that you could do this is ideal for texture baking, where you only want one texture atlas or one material that goes into a game asset or something like that. And for that we would keep this material here that we have, because if I now go into the shader and go into rendered view, you will see that all of this has the same material, which is not something we really want. We want to have control of each individual element, and to do that with a single material, you would normally, you would take, for instance, two principal BSDF nodes and put a mix shader, and then you would have some kind of mask to choose between, say, the dough and the icing, like this. But what is this value? Well, remember, we can transfer some attributes from geometry nodes into shader nodes. And so we need to create an attribute just for that. So we're gonna store a named attribute and we'll call it mask. We can make it an integer and put it here. I'll show you. So this is just the dough. This can be done realistically at any point where the dough is a mesh, but I typically tend to put them in the last possible place, so that absolutely every part of the dough will get the material, so it doesn't by accident happen that you put it in, miss some part of the mesh. And we can keep that at 0 here. Then we will take the icing, where the icing is going into the final output, which is right here. The icing is done, and then it joins the dough here and goes then into the group output. So we're gonna take this and put number 1. And then the same thing we'll do for the sprinkles. So we could put sprinkles here and here, and we'll do 2 and 3. So this is just the sprinkles, and this is just the circular spherical sprinkles. And that's that. And then we can go into here. Let's hide all of that. So now we need to get this value into here, and we can use this attribute node. Set to geometry, and we type into here mask exactly the same way as we did in geometry nodes, and it is case sensitive, so be careful. You can just copy the string straight from geometry nodes if you're unsure that it's going to be correct. So with this, now you can see that every part is a different brightness, because this is 0, this is the dough is 0, the icing is 1, this sprinkle is 3, and this sprinkle is 2, and this sprinkle is 3. And if we use a compare node, we can put the epsilon something really small and put 0, and then we get the dough. We put 1, we get the icing. So I can take this value here, put it in here, and you will have the icing a different color. And then I could just duplicate this and make like blue sprinkles, and take this, put it to 2. We got sprinkles, and then do one more, and we'll make a metallic white like this, and put that to 3, and there we go. And then you would have all of the parts separately. But like I said, we're not going to do this. We are going to do something that's more widely used. So we're just going to get a principled BSDF back here. So what we're going to do is apply a separate material to each element. So we will have 4 slots here, 1 for each material. So this will be the dough. We can keep this as the dough. Then we'll create a new material, call it icing, and do a sprinkle 1 and sprinkle 2. And to just visualize this in the viewport, we're gonna go into the material properties. In the viewport display, we're gonna give it some doughy color like that. This is just for the viewport. The icing can have some pink color, be kind of shiny. Sprinkle will do like a purple, also kind of shiny, and for the other sprinkle we'll do pure white and do slightly metallic and really shiny. But as you can tell, everything is the doughy color, so we need to go into geometry nodes to figure this out. So instead of using these masks, I'll just remove them because we don't need them. That attribute is no longer of use to us. We need to use this node, the set material node, and currently it's set up so that all of the elements are coming into the set material and it's applying this to all of them. You could have a selection like the mask we just did and have them all here in a row, but a more typical way to use it is to put it where we put the attribute for the masks. So only put it here and where just the dough comes out, and it applies that material to the dough. Then we take another one of these nodes, put it where the icing comes out with nothing else in it, and we change this into icing, and now we have some icing there. And then we do the same here with where the sprinkles come out and the spheres come out. And we do sprinkle 1 and sprinkle 2. And there we go. Now you can already see in the viewport that everything has its own material, but we haven't created any materials. So let's get on that. So in the shader node tree like this, we're gonna start. So let's start with the dough. Now, as I said in the first part of this. And if you're a 3D artist, you know this very well. Nothing beats reference. When you want to create something in any style, find a reference for it. And if you're trying to make something photoreal, then nothing beats the real thing. And that's why I bought some donuts just for this. So I already almost ate one of them, so we have a second one. So this is kind of the look we are trying to replicate. So it has kind of this reddish, orangish, yellow. It's this red, yellow, orange shade. And if you look very closely, if you have a donut, pick it up and look at it. It has like this micro detail, and it is like kind of shiny, and a little bit you can see the subsurface scattering sort of kind of going in, not very deep, but it is looking soft. And then there's some noise patterns for displacement. So we're gonna try to replicate all of this. So we'll start with the most prominent thing, the color. So let's start with the color. Going to rendered view here. What we want to do is kind of get the base, so the like underlying color of the dough, and that is kind of this very desaturated yellowish beige color, something like that. Yeah. And what we want to do is actually have a mix color node, and let's get this color in this into here, and we want to maybe color burn it, to get sort of this burnt fried orange. And the value of this color will determine the darkness, and the saturation will determine the redness, and then you have sort of the strength. So let's try to find a color. So we want it to be kind of orange, more orange than the actual dough is naturally, like 0.1. Yes, we're getting somewhere. And then it's not this dark. It's kind of more like that, maybe. I will not be telling you the exact values I'm using. That's for you to figure out yourself, because it's better for you to learn to do it yourself as well. A little bit more red. We can also like add noise to. We will add noise to this to also break it up some more. But now you can see that the line in the middle is missing. And if you remember, in the dough we made this middle, and we stored this attribute called mid. So if I take the attribute node and put mid here, you will see that we have this little gradient here. So if I plug this in here, you will see that it's reversed. So we can do let's just do an invert for now, like that. And we're already getting closer. It is clearly too saturated in my opinion, so we'll tweak that in a sec. Maybe just pull the saturation on the dough back a bit, and then actually make this more red. So that is looking more accurate. But this line is completely perfect, so we want to sort of break it up with some noise. So we're gonna get a noise texture, and we're gonna set the coordinates to object, and let's put actually 4D. I'll explain why a bit later. So let's find a scale that is nice. 150 seems pretty decent. Put some detail to it, maybe 6. And roughness, something like that. Use a, let's see, what if we use color burn? Then we get kind of this, and that's actually exactly what we want. So using color burn, we can sort of pull in that line, and using a color ramp before, we can kind of make it more pronounced so that it's not fading as fast. Yeah, with ease, that looks nice. That looks kind of like the donut, yeah. It's super orange. Oh wow. Let's actually make it more red. Like that. So that is a bit too much of the white. Let's do more of the noise. So tweaking this until you're kind of happy with the color. I am not happy with this color whatsoever. We can also do like math in here, multiplying it, so we can sort of like tweak the strength so it's not as intense. That's fine for now. It's not looking like the reference, but it is getting closer. Again, tweak these values to your liking, and now we will add some noise to sort of break this up. So we're going to add a multiply node and add a second piece of noise. Change the W value so we get a different pattern of noise. We're going to make it a bit bigger, so let's do like 50, and we're going to have like that, and put this in here. And just make it dark, and we don't want it to be black, of course. We want it to be something reddish. And using a color ramp, we can sort of crush the values a bit to not have it too uniform. And this is where we're at now. Let's look at the reference. Yeah, it's not that intense really. So we're gonna just pull the value up and the saturation down. Just a little bit of noise in there. And then we can actually kind of we can use this to add some bump to the donut. That's already looking way more like a donut. I'm still not happy with the color, but we'll tweak that. Okay, so then we're getting pretty close. Now it's kind of the roughness that is the big issue. So it is clearly like where it's fried, it's shinier. So let's use this same mask. This mask. And do a map range. And it gives me, of course, in vector. So we're going to just change that to float. I'm way worse at keeping shader nodes clean than the geometry nodes, even though it's exactly the same. Anyway, so put that in the roughness. So where it's white one, I'm gonna put a bit of a shinier color, and where it's 0, I'm gonna put something a bit rougher. So that's looking pretty decent. Then we need some subsurface scattering because, well, organic stuff like donuts have subsurface scattering. Actually, technically everything has some level of subsurface scattering. So we're just gonna add some to this. And we're gonna put the radius to 0.1 on all the channels, so it's like that, and put the weight to maybe 0.2, because it's not super subsurfacey. And you could use this color maybe also as the, maybe this color as the radius, for the radius. Yeah. And that is decent enough. Let's make it this value. Nope. 0.07. 0.08 was actually fine. I mean, to be honest, it's actually super close. It's not bad. The gradient is actually smoother. So let's pull that in and pull it like that, maybe. Yeah. That's pretty good. The bump is also pretty nice. Let's actually add also the kind of this into the bump. So we can put that in there. Invert that is looking really bad. Just slightly in there, not too much. Yeah. I'm happy with that. Let's go to the icing. So, the icing. The little reference of icing that I have left for the pink one. It is kind of this diffuse with some shine material. It has a really fine noise bump, and then it has kind of this splotchy random spots. There's like 2 levels of noise on it based on my great reference that I have. I can actually try to show you. Let's see if you can see in like this, that there's kind of this I hold it towards the light, this really high frequency detail, and then there's this bigger wavy noise. So we're gonna use both of those. And then, as you can see, it's not really like super reflective. It is shiny, but it's not reflective. So we're gonna try to replicate that. So back in here, we're gonna start by getting a, let's start with an RGB and put it here and give it like this, very bright, not super saturated, not super pink, sort of like that. Pull it back a little bit, like that color, yes. And for now, we'll just make it like shiny. Yeah, that's looking pretty okay. And we're gonna immediately try to get like the subsurface to look right. So we get something like that. So we get kind of this like light here. Yeah, way too shiny, but we'll fix that. So that's a decent start. So first we'll do like the big noise. So we're gonna get a noise texture set to 4D and also object coordinates. Let's look at that kind of like this and get the roughness to 0. Like that, yeah, 125. And then we take this into a bump node and put this in here. So then it just breaks up that shape. So without and with, kind of just makes it a little bit wavy. It's pretty good. I like that. And then we get a second one, which is going to be this super high frequency detail. So we're going to get the detail to 6 and then pull the roughness up and put this into the height and just get a different noise pattern. So this is obviously too strong. So we're going to get the distance to way smaller. Like that. And that's already like breaking up the reflections quite well. Even if I put this to 0, you can see that the reflection kind of becomes diffuse. And this is actually like combining the bump also affects roughness kind of in a different way. So we don't want it to be pure shine, but we want it to be kind of shiny. And it needs more subsurface scattering and less shine. Then we want to add some color variation to this, and we can use this noise texture actually to do that. So we can get a hue saturation value here and kind of use this noise as the factor. And we want to just color ramp, get the, yeah, I'm gonna invert that bump and then kind of crush this value to be sort of like that, so that we can take this some saturation away, not that much, 0.8 maybe, and make it a slightly brighter like this. 1.1 and do 0.85 like so. That's looking kind of okay. If I take that away, put all this to 1.1. Yeah. Okay, next we'll go forward pretty efficiently. Sprinkles. So if you want to make the sprinkles all the same color, do that. But a lot of sprinkles come in many colors, like you can see here. There's some purple, some green, some yellow, some red, and some white, and brown, and blue, and orange. There's many colors in here. And we want to randomly have all of these colors in the sprinkles. So let's do that now. So we can get a a object info node and get this random. And you can see that there's a random value for each one. And if we plug this into a color ramp and plug this into here, now all of the sprinkles are black and white. But we don't want them to be black and white, we want them to be different colors. So if we set this into constant, we can pick colors for each one. So we're gonna start with, let's start with white. So we'll get almost pure white, like 0.95. The second color we can make red. So 0.95 on the saturation, 0.95 on the brightness. They are super saturated, the ones on my donut, so I'm gonna go 0.985, yeah, 0.985. And they're a bit darker, so let's go 0.8, like that. And then we can add another stop, which will just make a different color so we can see how much red do we want. And we want to make that one, let's make that one purple. And it's kind of this pastel-y purple. Yeah, like that. Kind of darker, 0.8, 0.7 maybe. Yeah, it's looking like something. And then we can make the next color. Let's make that green. And it's also like this kind of pastel green. Pretty dark actually. Even darker than that. Something in that area. Sure. One more color. That will be yellow. Let's do yellow. It's kind of saturated, bright yellow. Like that. And then more. You can add as many colors as you want, to be honest. I'm just adding what I see on my donut. What am I missing? Orange. I'm missing orange from my sprinkles. Let's do that. Orange. We're running out of space. I can't really see the orange that much anymore. The orange one, it's also like super saturated, super vibrant orange. Like that. And if I were to distribute them all evenly, it would look kind of too perfect. So you actually kind of want to have some colors that are more dominant and some that are less, so it's more random. Like that. That is an interesting color combination, but I'm just copying what I see. We can always adjust this later. Now, sprinkles are rarely this perfect in color. They have this like really micro detail noise. So we're gonna look at this and do a noise texture. Object coordinates and do a 4D, and we're gonna take this random and put it in here so each one gets a little bit of a different noise pattern. So we're gonna go like 500 and detail to 5 and roughness to the max. Yeah, that's perfect. So then we're gonna do a hue saturation value and a color ramp. Look at that, put the black value like this. Maybe do a little bit more detail like that, and then like desaturate and brighten them up like so. So then it has this like high frequency detail bit, maybe a bit too intense, that desaturation. And then we can use the same in the bump height to add some bump to them, and that is intense. So there's some little bump, and we'll do it inwards. So it's kind of like the sugar has melted away from the surface, and we make them a bit shinier like that. Perfect. It's starting to look pretty tasty. And then the final sprinkle, it's gonna be an easy one. We're gonna make it really bright. No, actually 0.7 is good. And make it metallic. So I'm gonna replicate kind of this metallic sprinkle ball effect. Maybe use a noise texture also on these with object coordinates. Let's see if that's working as intended. Yes, it is. 85865 like that. Map range from 0.2 to 0.35. 0.35. Put that in the roughness, and then we get this. Let's actually, for these sprinkles, add some surface scattering also. Radius weight 0.01, 0.5, 0.1, 0.2. And there we go. Now we have a donut. And one thing that we can do to sort of randomize all of this is to use that object info node and take this random value into here, and math add this value into there, and then copy that. The icing, we will do this and add this value here. Oh yeah, and then we will do a color ramp and do kind of the same thing here as we did with the sprinkles. And get just some different hues. Let's get like this white chocolate one that I have here. Maybe add a stop with maybe like a dark, like a milk chocolate color. So something like that maybe. And if we use this random value and put this into here, the white should be more saturated, maybe darker. So if I now were to duplicate this a bunch of times, you would get like the randomized colors. And we can now put a different, oh, that's the wrong one. Put a different seed on each one to get some naturally different donuts with different dripping and different colors and different seeds for everything. So none of them are identical, and they are looking very tasty, and I am so ready to now eat my donuts. So I think that is it for this tutorial series. If you made it this far, then congratulations, you have finished this series for the procedural donut. We made everything in geometry nodes and we made the shaders procedurally, and I really hope you learned something and can now go out and try to make something in geometry nodes on your own. If there's any questions on something that was unclear during the series, please leave the comments down below and I'll help figure those out. And if you want to learn something else that I didn't touch on in this series, please let me know and I will get to that as well. If you like this content, consider subscribing because there will be more of this in the future. But until then, thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time.